So welcome everybody to Sunday Night Scripture. Greatly appreciate all of you for attending today. And we're going to move on to Revelation chapter 7. And what I'm going to do, guys, is kind of forewarn you that I'm going to spend a lot of time outside of Revelation chapter 7 in order to explain to you why I believe what the interpretations actually are. And to remind everybody, we do take here an historical point of view of the book of Revelation, specifically from chapter 1 to 19, that this was the fulfillment of what happened in the Roman and Jewish war in 70 AD. And that was Jesus fulfilling all things as he promised in that generation that he was speaking to. So, in all of that, I'm going to briefly explain to you what I think Revelation chapter 7 is about. From verses 1 to 8, I'm going to suggest to you that this is about saving the remnant of Old Covenant Israel, not modern day Israel, Old Covenant Israel back in the first century, because God promised that he would save a remnant. And this is prophesied in the book of Isaiah, and we will be going there. And then, of course, Paul explains it further in Romans chapter 9. And I think you will see high amounts of evidence that in Mark 13, Jesus himself talks about the elect that will be gathered when he's talking about the end of the age, and which is for them the end of the old covenant and the ushering in of the new covenant under Christ, bringing in the Christian, if you will, the Christian age. After the Roman Empire, which is the fourth beast in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, that fourth beast is finally broken down. So there was, of course, a judgment on Israel, but he had to save a remnant because he promised the fathers. So that's 1 to 8. And then I'm going to show you that from 9 to 17 is about the resurrection. And again, this is going to be very interesting because what we don't realize sometimes with the idea of futurist eschatology, future, that Jesus is going to come to finish. It's like, well, wait a minute. Is he finished? Because if he's finished, then he's finished. If he's not, then he hasn't finished it. See, the futurist position, and I mean this as kindly as I can say it, you're essentially saying, well, he's kind of done, but not really. Because the futurist eschatology attaches the resurrection to the coming of the Lord Jesus. So if the Lord Jesus came, then the resurrection occurred. That's very important. And then that's with, and of course, if you put the coming of the Lord Jesus in the future, and who knows when, then you attach the resurrection, and then that's where we get all these rapture doctrines, pre, mid, post, etc., etc. I'm going to suggest to you that this is an historical event, and that in fact, in the book of Acts, Paul was warning, if you will, that it was indeed about to happen. And Jesus himself in the Gospel of John said it was about to happen. All right. So now that I've told you what Revelation chapter 7 is about, I'm going to take on the first half of it, read it through, give you some nuances that I think are really important that we can glean from. And then I'm going to go to the other scriptures to show you that this indeed is about Old Covenant Israel and that remnant that God promised to save to the forefathers like David, Jacob, Isaac. All right. So Revelation chapter 7, starting at verse 1. And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. Now, I'm going to take us quickly here because we see that word earth. And as I mentioned before, the word earth does not mean the entire world. It means, in this particular case, the word is gi every single time. So there's 1093, and I'm going to click on, I'm just going to show you they're all saying 1093. The word earth is the same every single time. All right. So we got 1093, 1093, and 1093. And showing you that, I'm going to click here for you and show you, as I've had before, but just in case someone is new to this, I'm showing you that earth doesn't mean the entire world. It means the land of, for example. So earth, land, region, country, inhabitants of a region. So he's referring to the inhabitants of a region. It's not the entire world. Cosmos in the Greek is the word for the entire world. And oikumene is the word for the known Roman world at the time. This would be the smallest of the bunch. So it's very specified to this area, which I'm going to suggest is mainly Israel. Could affect some things outside of Israel, but the region is restricted. So that eliminates the idea that it's the entire world under a new world order of some kind. No. It's a specific area, primarily Israel. And you can see here in Matthew 2:6, they use that word that way. So here's some examples here. The land of Judah, right? So it's a land of Israel. Would be like the country of Canada, that type of thing. All right. So going back to Revelation 7, I wanted to prove that as we moved forward, because this way you don't we stay in the idea, right, that earth means a specific region as opposed to the entire world. Because I really need you to hang on to that thinking as we move forward. And that sets the precedence of it. And keep in mind these 4 angels and the 4 winds, okay? Because we're going to go to Mark 13, and Jesus says this exact same language in Mark 13. And he says, and I saw another angel. So now that's 5 angels ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. We good? All right. And so the one that has the seal of the living God is an angel. So in case somebody might have to mute, sorry, man. So what's important here to understand is monarchy. God has a kingdom army, if you will. And when you read the scriptures in a monarchy type form, you will understand it better. Because as you notice, it's not God himself that is putting the seal on. He assigns this to an angel who, by the way, has a little bit of a team. A small one, big one, you can make up your own mind on that. And also notice that he has the authority to tell the other 4 angels, don't make a move until I'm done what I got to do. Do you see how this is operating in the spiritual realm? That it's organized. It's organized. And the Father is indeed the Father. And he's allowing or assigning or contracting the jobs to these angelic beings. All right. So, and as he continues, and he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth. And again, this is always the same area. It's a specific region, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God. Notice he says we, till we. So he has some with him. Sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Now, I always like to pause here because of the whole mark of the beast that's coming in the future of this specific book. If the seal of the living God is spiritual, which indeed it must be because it's angelic beings that are doing it, what causes us to think that the mark is physical for the mark of the beast in chapter 13? I'm going to suggest to you that it's all that, chip barcode stuff, right? So what I'm going to suggest to you, though, that that's not accurate. Now, that doesn't mean it can't manifest itself physically, right? So, for example, if somebody is sealed with the living God or by the living God, right, you might, or I think you would be able to spot that maybe they, tend to pray, or maybe they tend to help their neighbor. Maybe they tend to do things that are godly, if you will, right? Maybe they really care about their spouse and really try their best to provide good things for their children. Maybe they love to sing worship songs and psalms and things of that nature, right? You would see somehow, I think you would be able to see that that person loves God and God loves them, right? It would manifest. Whereas someone with the mark of the beast, that might manifest physically as well. But I'm going to suggest to you that's the physical manifestation of what's happening in the spirit. All right. So, and before I continue, I don't recommend you get any kind of barcodes tattooed or imprinted into your forehead, nor any of your body parts. All right. So don't put a chip, not even your calf. Okay. So I've covered that. I'm not inspiring anybody to do it. I actually always tell people, look, if you want to avoid the cashless society, then maybe you should use cash more often. Right? So it's kind of something for us to all think about, right? So we're going to make a cashless society. Well, maybe that's because 99% of the time you carry your debit card around all the time. Might we prevent it if we actually trained ourselves to use cash more often? And then that would prevent them, right? Because we have that strength. So just a little side suggestion. If you don't want it to happen, then you can do things that might cause it not to happen. And I think that's why we're here, to make sure they don't do things like that. So use cash at the gas station, use cash at the grocery store. Don't worry about the points all the time, that kind of thing. All right. So we'll continue here. And he says, and I heard the number of them which were sealed. And there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. I'm not going to read 5 to 8, but he literally lists off the tribes of Israel, and it's 12,000 each tribe. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that this is Old Covenant Israel, not modern day Israel, Old Covenant Israel. And now, whether this number is a literal 144,000 or not is not as important as understanding that it's Old Covenant Israel in the first century, and to understand that it's a small amount. It's a small amount. It's a small remnant. And I'm going to show you how I come to that conclusion. In the same chapter here in verse 9, he says, after this, I beheld and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and peoples. And so this is completely different, isn't it? So even if someone wants to try to allegorize this, which is fine, but the allegory has to fit the picture. What's the picture? In verse 9, he can't number them. And it's from all over the place. That's verse 9. But in verse 4, he can number them. And he tells you exactly what the number is and exactly where they're from, which is Israel. So even if you want to go allegory, it doesn't change the fact that it has to be Israel and it has to be a small amount. And to challenge the people in the futurist position, do you really think that God's waiting 2,000 years just to put Israel through the same stuff they went through in the first century, just to grab 144,000, when we could actually just plant the seeds of the gospel of Jesus Christ to them and maybe save 144,000 every 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 years? Think about that. See, reason that through. Reason that through. But see, if they convince you, it's not really Israel, and that's really us, or there's some people that walk around claiming that it's them. No, this is not, no. Any more than you're Noah or I'm Abraham. No, this is historical, and this is a certain small remnant that God promised to save in the first century. All right, so how am I going to prove that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to Isaiah 10:20. All right. And this is prophesied by Isaiah. He says, and by the way, this is quoted by Paul. So he further explains all of this in the book of Romans. So Isaiah prophesies in the Old Testament and says, and it shall come to pass in that day that the remnant, note that word, of Israel, and such as are escaped of the house of Jacob. Notice that? Such that are escaped. What did Jesus say? When you see the Roman armies come, get out of there, because it's going to be bad. That's what he said. He says, and shall no more again stay upon him that smote them, but shall stay upon the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. Does that sound a little like what Jesus said when he says he's seeking those to worship God in spirit and in truth? Yeah. The remnant, you see that word again. And who's Isaiah prophesying to, by the way? Old Covenant Israel. That's who he's prophesying to. And he says, the remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob. And we've discussed this last week. Jacob is Israel. He says that in Genesis 37. He exchanges the name. Jacob had the 12 sons, which gave you what? The 12 tribes of Israel. What are you seeing in Revelation 7? The 12 tribes of Israel. Unto the mighty God. All right. So, and then he continues, says, for though thy people Israel be as the sand of the sea, yet a remnant of them shall return. The consumption, which means the destruction decreed, the destruction decreed, 70 AD, shall overflow with righteousness. For the Lord God of hosts shall make a consumption even determined in the midst of all the land. And I'm including verse 23. And notice he says in the midst of all the land. And who was he prophesying to? Israel, right? Gi means region, land, area. So the reason why I'm including verse 23 is because Paul infers this verse, but he uses different words to explain it. So there are times in the New Testament where Paul is quoting, but he doesn't always quote word for word because he's explaining what Isaiah actually meant. And I don't mind telling you what he means there. Once you know the words, it's the Lord will do a short work in righteousness. Okay. And if you read that, it says, for the Lord God of hosts shall make a consumption even determined. That means to a full, quick end. That's what that actually means. And Paul explains that. So you got to try to catch that. All right. In the midst of all the land. And remember, Isaiah is a prophet of Israel. So now this is going to be a longer portion here because I'm trying to just confirm with you so that you understand that Revelation chapter 7, that verses 1 to 8, is about Old Covenant Israel and God maintaining his promise. What did Isaiah say? Although Israel be like the sand of the sea, only a remnant will be saved. And do you notice that 144,000 is a small number? And it's quite determined, isn't it? All right. So I'm going to read here from the book of Romans. I'm going to take a sip of water here first. And before we go into this, I want you, because I think some of us might experience this. You might have some loved ones, people that you've grown up with, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, cousins, friends that, I don't know, let's pretend you're Greek, okay? And you went to the same restaurants together. You guys enjoyed the same kind of celebrations, the same kind of language, the same kind of maybe Greek songs. And so you feel attached to them, right? You feel connected to them. Well, guess what? Paul feels the exact same way because he's a Jewish man and he believes in his Messiah who came, but he's preaching the gospel to his own countrymen and they're rejecting it and it's breaking his heart. It's breaking his heart. So try to put yourself in that mind frame because that's what he's talking about. But he also ends up saying, but that's exactly what the scripture said was going to happen. All right, so he says in Romans 9, he says, I say the truth in Christ, I lie not. My conscience also bearing me witness in the Holy Ghost that I have great heaviness and continual sorrow in my heart, for I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh, who are Israelites. So who is he talking about? His kinsmen according to the flesh, which means the Israelites. Why? Well, because he's a Benjamite. He's part of the tribes of Israel. To whom pertain the adoption and the glory and the covenants. Notice that's plural. We're going to talk about that for a moment. And the giving of the law and the and the service of God and the what? The promises. It pertained to them, his kinsmen of the flesh, whose are the fathers, and of whom, as concerning the flesh, concerning, let's say, nationality, Christ came, who is over all, God blessed forever. Amen. See, what does Jesus always say? He said, I've come for the lost sheep of Israel, right? So he did come. And that's why he says, how often, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, would I have gathered you like chicks to a hen, but you just wouldn't. You just wouldn't. So your house remains to you desolate. So that's essentially the tone here. So let's talk about this covenants, all right? Because sometimes we forget that Moses wrote the first 5 books, correct? Pretty much everybody agrees on that one. And God gave him this, for example, the book of Genesis. But guess who's not actually in the book of Genesis? Moses himself is not in the book of Genesis. He is writing down the actual, literal, historical truth of mankind, and he's bringing that to Israel. No one else had that. Israel had that. I want you to really stop, if you can, to think about that Moses is not in the book of Genesis, and he's getting directly from the Creator how mankind started and how it began. So he gets the actual full-on truth of the account of Noah. So why does he say covenants? Why does he say covenants? Well, I think there's more than one reason. First of all, let's start here. The Mosaic covenant had a promise of a new covenant, Jeremiah 31:31, and it's in Deuteronomy too. So there was a promise of a new covenant after the old covenant was fulfilled. So that's 2 covenants right there. So you got plural. But I'm going to also suggest that they had the covenant that God had with Adam. Not everybody knew that, but the Israelites did. And now we do, by the way. And then he made a covenant with Noah after the deluge, the great flood. He had a covenant with Noah. They know that now. Moses wasn't born for that. He was told that by the Creator himself. Then fast forward to Abraham, and that's a covenant with Abraham. Moses receives that information and brings it to Israel. We don't know that they understood all that historically prior. So Israel was given all of this, right? So that's what he's talking about. And that's why he says, to them pertains the adoption, right? To them pertains the glory, the covenants, the giving of the law and the service of God and the promises, right? And then he continues, he says, not as though the word of God hath taken none effect. So he's about to set you up for, look, it should have been a lot more, but it wasn't. But it's not that there's no effect. It's just that it's not what it could have been. That's the vibe here that I'm getting from Paul, explaining the remnant that was prophesied from Isaiah. He says, not as though the word of God hath taken none effect, for they are not all Israel which are of Israel. They are not all Israel which are of Israel. That doesn't make any sense unless you start to understand the spiritual kingdom that Jesus began. He said what? The kingdom of God does not come with observation. He said, my kingdom is not of this world. This is the kingdom, the spiritual kingdom, I make all things new, the new heaven and new earth, the new creation, right? Starting with and that's going to begin with Christ, the chief cornerstone, see? So not everybody that's of Israel is Israel. So if you don't understand the reconciliation to God and the holy Jerusalem, which is in heaven, which is a heavenly place, not an earthly one. It's not the one that's down the street that you can hop on a plane and go visit. That's not the one. It wasn't the true God's Jerusalem back then, and it's not God's true Jerusalem now. So he's making it very specific here, by the way. And then he says, neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all the children, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. That is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. This is the word of promise. At this time will I come, and Sarah shall have a son. So I'm going to briefly explain this. I would recommend that you do study also Galatians chapter 4, because he further explains this. But bottom line is, if you go to Genesis, Abraham is promised to have a miraculous son, if you will. Why do I say that? Well, Sarah is barren. She's had no children, and she's fairly old. I can't remember the exact age, but she's already up there, 60, 70-ish kind of zone. And she even says, well, am I to have pleasure now that I am old? Right? So, but God says, I'm going to give you a seed. I'm going to give you a son. I'm making a promise to you. You're going to have a son. In the meantime, as they're waiting, make a long story short, Sarah says, well, maybe you should go and have a baby with Hagar and she'll be like a surrogate mom. Child of the flesh. See? I'm not thinking it's a DNA thing. I'm thinking it's a faith thing. It's a promise thing. It's a belief thing. It's also painting the picture that it has to be by God that you receive the spirit of resurrection, the spirit of reconciliation, the redemption. God has to do that. God has to do it. So it's a picture, I think, for us. And I think it's further explained again in Galatians 4. So I don't think it's a DNA thing. I think, though, that we have the allegory, the picture. God gave us the picture that Sarah was given the promise. The promise was to Abraham and Sarah. So Isaac was the child that Sarah ended up having, and they were even older when they had it. I think Abraham was almost 100 years old. So the bondwoman has Ishmael. That's not the child of the promise. So in the allegory, I'll call them the Ishmaelites are the flesh, the carnal ones that don't see or care for the spiritual kingdom, the reconciliation. They're earthly, they're carnal minded, just like it was carnal to just go, okay, well, maybe you can go have a baby with that person over there. But with Sarah was a son of the promise. And that's why it says, in Isaac, thy seed will be called. So he's setting this remnant up. That's what he's setting up. He's setting up to explain that it's a remnant. All right. So the promise is fulfilled. This promise is fulfilled, but it's not all people that happen to be Jewish in Israel in the first century. That's what he's explaining here. And that's what Revelation chapter 7 is about. And remember, that's my goal here, to prove that to you. And now I'm going to go to 27 here to show you how he quotes Isaiah. And this is where he does it right here. And I know in the Old King James, for some reason they put an E, but that's Isaiah, okay? Isaiah also crieth concerning Israel. And notice it's always saying concerning Israel. So if Paul is quoting the Old Testament prophet, who do you think the Old Testament prophet was prophesying about? New Israel? Modern day Israel? No, he was prophesying about Old Covenant Israel, the Israel of the first century, the Israel that ultimately was making deals with Caesar and ultimately used the Roman powers to crucify Christ. All right? Nothing to do with today's Israelites, nothing to do with them at all. And so Isaiah also crieth concerning Israel, Paul says, quoting him, saying, though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, a remnant shall be saved. See? He's saying that again. And then he continues, says, for he will finish the work and cut it short in righteousness, because a short work will the Lord make upon the earth. All right? And just so we fully understand here, 2,000 years sound like a short work to you? In fact, the futurist position says, well, he finished half the work, but he's got to finish some more. So apparently he finished some of it and then he's taking a 2,000-year vacation. Do you see the problem with that position? That flies in the face of this scripture. Whereas if you look at it that he was born, right? And the virgin birth, miraculous. We know about the Magi, right? And they worshiped him and he's just a child, right? And then he grows and he's doing amazing things. He's learning things incredibly. And then, of course, he starts his ministry, right? In and around the age of 30 years old. In 3 years, he starts healing. He's doing all this miraculous thing, these miraculous things, right? And then he's crucified and then he resurrects, right? This is all happening in what? That's about 30 to 35 years there. And then we'll continue on. And then, of course, there's the Feast of Pentecost. And then the disciples are preaching the gospel because he's risen, and save yourself from this untoward generation, et cetera, and 70 AD, as he predicts in Luke 21, and I believe Mark 13 and Matthew 24, the temple is destroyed and Israel is taken down. That's a short work. See, that's a short work. He does it in about 70 years, all of it, including birthing the son. He's raised, preaches, gives up his body and blood for the sake of all of us, resurrects, and then the Feast of Pentecost. I mean, that's a short work. See, 2,000 years, folks, is not. That doesn't make any sense. So he's referring to Old Covenant Israel. And then he continues to explain that if it wasn't for God's direct election, and that's why, just a little side note here, this election that he's talking about here is the Israelites. Has nothing to do. Okay, we can talk about some other scriptures, but this one, there's no question that he's talking about Israel, the elect of Israel at that time, that remnant that God promised to save. So this has nothing to do with anybody else. So I'm letting that know because I know there's a lot of election discussion out there. Well, this election has nothing to do with me or you. I can assure you that. Because he's what? Concerning Israel. So it's pretty clear. And Isaiah said before, except the Lord of Sabaoth had left us a seed, we had been as Sodom and been like unto Gomorrah. That's what Isaiah said. If it wasn't for God stepping in, right, and opening Sarah's womb and giving the promise and having Isaac, all you'd have is Ishmael. All you'd have is children of the flesh. So I think that's the allegory. I think that's the picture. And I think that's where God's promises and his intervening in the election and the 144,000 is attached. All right. So let's now go to, I'm going to suggest that we go to Mark 13. So let's go there. All right. And I want you to we'll try to remember a little bit. Mark 13 is about after a question of the destruction of the temple. This is very, very important because a lot of times when people get to the middle of Mark 13, they forget what the original question was. So I am going to take a little bit of time kind of sussing through this, make sure you stay in context and time relevance and audience relevance so we don't stick ourselves into this conversation. All right, so Mark 13. And as he went out of the temple, this is Jesus going outside of the temple. Notice it's the temple. And remember, guys, this is where all their faith, all their laws, everything is all the feasts, all of the old covenant. I've mentioned it before. I believe it's about 341 laws literally required that temple, and it had to be in that specific spot. So the destruction of that temple means the destruction of their entire law and faith system. All right. So as he went out of that temple, one of his disciples saith unto him, Master, see what manner of stones and what buildings are here. Okay. So he's pointing out how magnificent this place is. And look at Jesus' response here. Jesus answers and says, Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. And here, unlike in John, he doesn't mention about his own body being raised. He's just literally telling this disciple, hey, see this building? Yeah, you're impressed with it? Yeah, it's coming down. Now that's shocking, at least shocking enough where, as you can see in verse 3, as he sat upon the Mount of Olives over against the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew. All right? So it's very, very specific, folks. Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately. He's having a private conversation with 4 Jewish men that are his disciples because they just heard him say that temple is going to be torn down. So they're kind of interested in finding out. Okay? They're interested, very interested in finding this out. And so we got to hold on to what's the context. He said that the temple's going to go down. What do they ask in verse 4? This is what they want to know. When shall these things be? And what shall be the sign when all these things shall be fulfilled? Notice that? Now, the question here, the 2 questions, here's the answer for the futurist if you maintain the future position. Here's what the answer should have been. Guys, I'll tell you, a zone of when this is going to be, but it ain't going to be for like a super long time, so it really isn't going to affect you. So, but I'll give you some information. That's not what he says. And then it says, what shall be the sign when all these things shall be fulfilled? He should say, look, I'll tell you what the signs are going to be, but you're not going to see any of them because it ain't going to be for like over 2,000 years. That's not what he says. So I'm going to ask you to think about it. Say, if you're the 4 private guys, if you're one of these guys and he answers and says, well, let me tell you, wouldn't you think it was going to happen in your time? The answer is very simple. Of course you would. Of course you would. You would think if you were them, Jewish men, Jesus just told you, temple's coming down, you're asking the question and he answers you and starts giving you all the signs on how it's coming, you'd think, okay, this is going to happen to us. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So when you look at it that way, it comes alive. And then you'll be able to connect it to Revelation 7, by the way, some of the commentary. So, and Jesus answering them began to say, take heed, lest any man deceive you. Deceive who? Me? No, them. Now, that doesn't mean I should look forward to people tricking me. No, but let's keep the audience relevance and the time relevance. And you realize, hey, yeah, he's talking to 4 of his disciples. So basically, this is how we should read it. Take heed lest any man deceive you, Peter, John, James, and Andrew. That's how we should read it. Okay, so try to keep that in your mind as we go. I'm not going to hit every line, but I'm going to hit some specific locations, okay, where he says, for example, but take heed to yourselves, for they shall deliver you up to councils. Did they not do that in the book of Acts? Of course they did. Read it. And in the synagogues, do you know, like synagogues, very, very Jewish in nature, right? And he says, and you shall be beaten. Read the first few chapters of Acts. That's exactly what they did to Peter, John, and James, because they started preaching Jesus and they dragged him in there and started beating him up and saying, hey, don't be preaching Jesus. And he told them, this is going to happen to you. Guess what? It happens to you. And it's in our scriptures that it's happening to them. And everybody wants to put this in the future. See the problem with that position? And by the way, I don't mind saying, guys, I mean, I know our world isn't perfect, but I can't get from here to the nearest Walmart, which is probably about 10 minutes from my house, without driving by like 4 churches, maybe even more, with a cross on top, right? These guys are preaching the gospel at a time where it's not very popular at all to preach it because they crucified Jesus. And they're saying, hey, that was the Messiah. So that's why the Jewish people who thought they shouldn't be preaching that were getting angry. So this fits to them, all right? And he says, you shall be beaten, you shall be brought before rulers and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them. And just a little side note, do you picture yourself being brought in before, King Charles? Hey, why are you here, Shade? Oh, well, because I believe in Jesus. Like, okay, kill him. Like, come on, guys. So why am I doing this? Because the futurist puts you in that mindset. The futurist position puts you in that mindset when you read this. And I'm sorry, like when you want to talk about anti-Semitism, I don't believe there's going to be, I don't believe, and I think I'm pretty safe and said, I don't think Jewish people want to drag me into any kind of place and beat the crumbs out of me, generally speaking. Now, might there be some bad people lurking somewhere? Oh, I don't know. But generally speaking, I don't think, I don't think people want to do this, in general. Okay, now that doesn't mean they like us. That doesn't mean we won't receive levels of persecution, but we still got to keep this in the context. I mean, he's saying rulers and kings, literally for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And we have holidays in our country about Jesus Christ. All right. Even the unbelievers enjoy Passover weekend because they get, the Good Friday and the Monday off, even the unbelieving, oh, sorry, Brie, I'm going to shout this out to you. Even the unbelieving teachers enjoy Passover. They get their paid days off, right? So, I mean, to kind of put ourselves in this, I'm just trying to really move people to get away from that thinking and really put the audience relevance to this. All right. So I'm going to continue to kind of just jump a bit. And he talks about when you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of. Now, again, he's telling this to Peter, John, James, and Andrew. And he says, when you guys see this, right, by Daniel, and he's talking about Daniel the prophet, right? He says, when you guys see Peter, John, James, and Andrew, the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let him that readeth understand. Pause. You think they're reading the book of Mark? The book of Mark didn't exist yet. He's talking to them and he cites Daniel the prophet. He's saying, read Daniel. Read Daniel, right? And that's where you have Daniel 9. That's where you have Daniel 2 and 7 and the 4 beasts, et cetera, right? So, and there's a lot of information even in Daniel 11, and I'm going to suggest Daniel 12 has the resurrection. That's why he's citing Daniel. There's lots of reasons, but that's one of the reasons. So that's the book he's talking about clearly, and he says it. And he says, then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains. Now, what are people in Denver, Colorado going to do? So, see what I'm saying? See how location relevant this is as well? And he's telling them, get out of there. That's what he's telling them. All right. And then, of course, he says, so basically that's what he says here. And I want you to look over here where he says in verse 20, okay? Because I think this is what he's talking about. And keep the audience relevance into this. Remember, it's 4 Jewish men, and Jesus just told them their Jewish temple is going to be destroyed. And then in verse 20, Jesus says, except that the Lord had shortened those days, the Lord will do a short work on the earth. And except that the Lord had shortened those days, no flesh should have been saved. Do you think he's talking about the entire world? Because he's not. He's not. He's talking about the temple. Do you see? See how if you forget he's talking about Israel and the temple and to 4 Jewish men, right? And by the way, if you check in the Greek here, he's talking about, he uses the term gi here as well, but for time's sake, I'll continue it, but I'll leave that with you. But either way, he's clearly talking about the destruction of the temple. This is not some annihilation of the entire earth. No, it's just not. He's talking to 4 Jewish men and talking about the destruction of the temple. That's what he's talking about. So the flesh, I believe that he's talking about is literally Israelites. And if you read the book of Josephus or Tacitus, they were killing them in droves, All right. So that's part of the reason why I'm going to suggest to you, he's saying he shortened. So he returned slightly before. And that's a whole other teaching, but I'm going to leave that. And he says here, but for the elect's sake, who's that? If you look up the definition of elect, it means the chosen ones. So when you're reading chapter 7, I'm thinking those are the chosen ones that are being sealed by the living God, because he says, but for the elect's sake, whom he hath chosen, he hath shortened the days. That's the remnant. All right. And then, of course, he continues and talks about the false prophets, which we touched upon in Revelation chapter 6, using the book of Josephus as some secular proof that it happened. And then he says in verse 27, all right, I have a little water here. Verse 27. Now let's remember what it said in Revelation chapter 7, verse 1. Okay, let's just remind ourselves. He said, after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. Now let's go to Mark 13 and read verse 27. And then shall he send his angels, plural, and shall gather together his elect, sealing of the 144,000, from the what? 4 winds, from the uttermost part of the earth. 4 winds. What does it say in Revelation 7? Holding the 4 winds of the earth. There's 4 angels, right? Okay. And by the way, since we're here, I'm going to make a move here because I want to show you that even Jesus uses the term ye here. So let me do that so that you'll see that matchup as well. All right. So sorry, I'm losing a little time here for you guys, but I think it's worth it just to see how the construct is the same. It's the same language. It's the same picture, right? Then he was sudden the angels, as you see, gathered together, the elect of him from the 4 winds, from the end of the Gi, 1093. Remember, we talked about that, right? Okay, so that's the word. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. All right, I'm set up for the next round. All right. So hopefully, and oh, by the way, this is very, very important to grab this too. So I think you're seeing that there's angels. I think you're seeing that those are the chosen ones. You're seeing the sealing from the angels of the living God. It says, don't move, because these ones got to get, we got to seal these ones, because these ones got to be the remnant. We're saving the elect, the chosen ones. And he says, so don't remember, it's the four angels in the four corners with the four winds. See? And he said the same language. And he says, from the uttermost part of the gi, of the area, of the region. You see? Same deal. And then, of course, in verse 30, what does Jesus say? Verily I say unto you that this generation, Peter, John, James, Andrew, your generation, shall not pass till all these things be done. What things? Everything he just said. Everything he just said, which people, quite frankly, in the futurist position, like to convince you that all of this stuff that you just read, and there's even more in there, is somehow in the future. No, he said that generation is going to experience it. And I don't mind saying, if Peter, John, James, and Andrew heard this, which we know it happened in 70 AD anyways. So what they're trying to do when we catch them on that one in the futurist position, when we catch them on that one, then they say, well, it's double pronged. I'm like, double pronged? Where are we getting that one? Like that's not in there. He's going to do Babylon, or Egypt, Babylon, Medo-Persian, Grecia, and Roman Empire again. Is that what you're saying? Like that's a little that's not in there. No. So he said that generation would not pass before all things be done. So I have to conclude that includes all of what he just said. So that's the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, because the Lord will do a short work on the earth in righteousness. All right. So hopefully that's been edifying for you to kind of clear that up. So I think we've got a good situation here. I'm hoping that you are in the position to say, yeah, that seems reasonable, that these are Israelites of the old covenant Israel. This has nothing to do with modern day Israel. And I always like to remind people, if you were reading these scriptures in 500 AD or 900 AD, would you think this had anything to do with any future Israel? Or would you assume he must be talking about the old covenant historical Israel? I'm going to suggest to you that more than likely must be the case, because Israel was destroyed in 70 AD. All right, so let's go to now Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, right? Because again, these are all the tribes that are listed here. And there we go. All right, so now this is the section that I told you was about the resurrection. So that's, again, when we talked about it with futurism, the resurrection hasn't happened yet, which is interesting, because then they'll also say, well, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Well, not if the resurrection hasn't happened. Right? So, and they go, well, it's a spiritual resurrection, but we're still waiting for our bodies. Oh, so that's two resurrections? So there's a spiritual one and then there's a physical one? Where are you getting that one? See how they kind of have to embellish because they're saying it's all in the future. You don't have to embellish it if you see it historically. See? Very simple, actually. Simplifies things. Now, that doesn't mean we got to nail every single solitary image or allegory, but I think it's greatly simplified, and they certainly can't steer the fear on us and, try to make us think that, Schwab and, Biden are going to take over the world. I don't think so. All right, so let's read verses 9 to 12, all right? And again, notice the contrast. 144,000, 12,000 from each tribe, and the children of Israel. Very specific numbers. Whether there's, it's got to be to the T or not, I'll let you decide, but it's very, in the picture, it's very specific. Here, it's the opposite. And he says, and after this, I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations. Of all nations? Yeah. Well, wait a minute. Well, think historically. right? Think historically, and then that'll start to make sense to you. And all kindreds, by the way, means tribes, but either way, and people and tongues stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with, note this word, or these two words, white robes. They're clothed with white robes, all right? Because I'm going to take you somewhere with that. And palms in their hands. And they cried with a loud voice saying what? Salvation to our God. They were saved. They were redeemed, right? Resurrected to our God, which sitteth upon the throne and unto the Lamb. And I'm going to continue to push the Father and the Son. The Father and the Son. That's what you're seeing in the book of Revelation. So I'll just remind you, we'll probably try to go there after. 2 John, verse 9. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both the Father and the Son. Not one, not three. Both. That's two. And that's what you're seeing here. Two. And cried with a loud voice, salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb. So there's two. And all the angels stood around about the throne and about the elders and the four beasts, which I prefer the translation living creatures, and fell before the throne on their faces and worshiped God, saying, Amen, blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be unto our God forever and ever. Amen. So now I got to set out to try my best to prove to you that they were already saying in the New Testament, in specifically the book of Acts, I'm going to also take you to Jesus's words, that the resurrection was around the corner. The resurrection was around the corner. How do I prove that? Well, I'll take you to this book right here, the book of Acts. What would be good here is if I could go multi and then, yeah, probably that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go multi and then I'm going to go back to interlinear, okay? Because in the context here, let me give you some context just a little bit. Let me see here. Oh, yes. Okay. So this is where Paul went into the areas to preach the gospel. So we're into the book of Acts and he's preaching to the Gentiles and the whole bit. And he runs into this area, to give you a little context, where they have a monument or an altar. And on that altar, it says, to the unknown God. All right. So I might be able to grab that here because the biggest thing for me is to make sure you understand the difference on the word mayo. It's a Greek word that doesn't mean something's going to happen. It means it's about to happen. It's a huge, huge difference in the word. All right. So actually it is quite a bit ways back. So you'll see it. It's in like around verse 24, 25. He sees this monument and starts talking to these guys. That's the context here. Okay. And I will use, from 30, I'll use 30 and 31. And he says, basically he's telling them, look, this whole thing of worshiping, stones and trees and things of this nature, that's all done. That's all done. Because now you do know who God is. That's what he's saying here. That's the context. And for this area, I'll use the ESV. Okay, guys? And it says, the times of ignorance God overlooked. So, he kind of, Old King James says he winked at that. He says, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. And then he says, and this is the English Standard, I'll show it to you in the King James, is because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness, right? I'm going to suggest to you that this word will is not will. It's he's about to. He's about to judge by a man whom he has appointed. And of this, he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. So one of the reasons, there's many reasons, one of the reasons why he raised Jesus from the dead, God did that to prove that he was God. And that was his son, and that he did carry his words, and he is the mediator and the high priest that can reconcile you to God. Okay, so that's when we understand the Father and Son, we understand he didn't resurrect Jesus just to resurrect him. He resurrected Jesus as also one of the reasons is to communicate to us that he has the redemption power, that Jesus is God, Jesus is Father has the redemption power.
to redeem us so that we can have hope in God and hope in his son, Christ Jesus. It was the demonstration of his redemption power. So now, here, like I said, I'll use Old King James real quick too, because he hath appointed a day. I'm going to stop there for a second. Lots of people say, see, God lives outside of time. I've mentioned this before. Well, first of all, you don't know that. How do you know? If he's eternal, he could live inside time. You don't know that. You don't know that. It might be true that he's outside of time. That might be true. It might not be. So that's just kind of a parroted statement, but you don't know. You don't know how God is living. You don't know that. There's nowhere in Scripture that says God lives outside of time. You're kind of making that up. I don't know how else to say that. However, I can tell you this much, regardless of whether he lives in or outside time, he appoints times. He appoints them. The sun shows up every day and the moon phases happen all the time, and all those feasts were appointed, certain dates, certain times. At that time in the Old Covenant, they even had a specific time for Sabbath. It had to be when the sun went down, and it didn't end until the sun went back up. All right? So this idea that you use, that's when they use the 1,000 years is like a day. It's like, no, he has appointed times. So he knows time. Believe me, he knows time. So whether he lives inside or outside, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't change anything. So as we continue here now, though, as you can see, it says he will judge, right? When I go to the Greek on that, though, the interlinear, you'll see it says, because he set a day in the which he is about to judge. See the difference on that? He's about to judge. He's about to. He's about to. And I've clicked on this word before, but I'm going to click on it again to show you that this word is meio or mello. Some people might want to pronounce it. And it's I intend, but the definition is to be about to. So it's an immediate future, not a long distance future. So for example, they use it 110 times. Here it's where it says, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. Well, it's actually for Herod is about to seek the young child to destroy him. And we all know that would be true because it was very shortly after Joseph and Mary got the warning to get out of there to go to Egypt, right? He's about to do this. He's about to. All right. So that's a big clue there for us. And there's another one. In the book of Acts, Paul, again, he is now in a situation. Let me go to the multi again so I can give you some of the English and then show you what it actually is in the Greek. He's in a situation where he's been accused by some Israelites because they were oftentimes after him. He was being accused of bringing in someone into the temple that he was not supposed to be bringing in. And so that was his situation. So now he's in front of Felix, right, who's essentially some kind of judge or governor type of guy, a higher up. And they're bringing these accusations against Paul. Now, Paul self-defends himself, by the way, because he knows the Torah very well and he knows the law and the prophets, and he ushers that into this conversation in his defense. And he says, I'm going to go right to the King James on this, okay, guys? And he commanded a centurion to keep Paul and to let him have liberty. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second. I feel like I'm in the wrong spot. His friends. Ministering to him. Hold on. Oh, okay. Hold on. My apologies. I'm not sure if I have this right. Let me see if I got the right location. Aha, I do not. Hold on. Let's go here. It's 13. Sorry, my apologies, guys. Aha. All right, there we go. Better. All right, so same context here. So he's being accused, as I mentioned, and now he's self-defending himself. So this is Acts 24, verses 13, 14, and 15. And so now he's responding to Felix and letting him know. And he says, neither can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me. He's basically saying, look, they can't prove what they are accusing me of because I didn't do that. That's what he's saying. And go to verse 14, and he says, but this I confess unto thee, that after the way which they call heresy. Pause for a moment. The way was a term they used for Christian because Jesus said he was the way, the truth, and the life. So there are times in the book of Acts where they talk about that way or the way, they're actually talking about Christians. So that's something that slides by some folks. So I want to make sure you know that. So what he's saying here is, but this I confess unto thee, that after the Christians, which they call, or Christianity, which they call heresy, because these are the accusers, he says, they call it heresy. He says, but so I worship God, the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. So now this is where he's maneuvering his legal argument right back to what was law for the Jewish people at that time. Old covenant Israel, the law and the prophets, right? Okay, so he pulls that in and he cites the resurrection because the Pharisees, quote unquote, believed the resurrection because of Daniel 12 and some other locations. So they had to confess that the resurrection was a real thing. And he uses that. And this is where he says, and have hope toward God, which they themselves also allow. See? And he's about to say that there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and of the unjust. So this is what he's confessing. He says, oh, but I believe in the same God. And he's talking about the resurrection here and how these guys also allow for this belief. This is what this is really about. Now you're going to say, okay, but Shade, it says shall be a resurrection. Right. But the word is about to be a resurrection. There is about to be one. And so if I go to the interlinear, that's where you'll find the word mayo. And that changes the vibe for us English-speaking folks, doesn't it? It says, a hope having in God, which also they themselves await. By the way, there's a better translation. They're waiting for what? They're supposed to be waiting for the resurrection as well. See? The resurrection of the dead ones. So they can have resurrection hope. And he says that there is about to be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. Do you see that? Huge difference. There it is, 31.95 mayo or mellow. What is that? It's there is about to. Okay? Is about to be. That's a big difference in the context of that definition. And I think it's very important for us to start seeing that that is oftentimes in Scripture that they're saying they put the word will or shall, but it's not just will or shall, because that kind of leaves it open-ended for us. Whereas if it's, hey, I'm about to come over, or I'm about to wash the car, you're not thinking 2,000 years. You're not. And depending on the context, you know, I've said this before, like if I say, well, I'm about to be finished building the house, you might give me more time because the context is a house, but you're not going to give me 197 years for that though. Okay. So the context of how you use it, sure, there's some fluctuation. I'm not saying it has to be a minute or 20 minutes, but you can't turn that into 2,000 years. You can't. So I'm going to suggest to you that's Paul saying there's about to be. There's about to be. That's Paul in the book of Acts talking. There's about to be the resurrection of the just and the unjust. And just real quickly, if I recall correctly, he says something here in verse 25 that I found interesting. Yeah. He says, this is the same word, by the way, right here. He says, reasoning then he concerning righteousness and self-control and the judgment that's coming, but again, it's about to come is more of the tone of that word. And coming is okay. If I say, like, I'm coming over, right? That's okay to use it. It's not a wrong translation. But again, if people keep teaching you futurism, you don't think to yourself audience relevance and time relevance. But notice what's beautiful about this, they can't change the facts here because basically it says Felix having become frightened. Now, why would he be frightened if it was like, one day this is going to happen? No, he was frightened because he said there's about to be a judgment. See? And so Felix is like, uh-oh, right? He gets nervous. He gets scared because Paul's like, hey, this is about to go down, you see? And I'm going to click on this word again to show you that it's the same word, right? When Paul was now about to open, see? In certain places, they do translate it like this in our English translations. but they conveniently somehow, and all English translations do this, where they'll say is about to, unless it has to do with certain things. And all of a sudden they just put shall or will. Well, I'm going to suggest to you, when there's 110 occurrences of this word, there might be, and that's just the New Testament. There might be lots of times where in scripture it's saying this is about to happen, and they just go, it will. And because of the futurist eschatology, you're thinking, okay, yeah, well, whatever, who knows, right? All right. So now I'm going to show you where Jesus himself says this is going to go down. And I'm not going to need the Greek for this. I'm not going to need the Greek for this because he plainly says it. John 5:24-25. And this is Jesus speaking himself. And he says, remember, and the reason why I'm showing you this is because I'm trying to tell you that this is an historical resurrection, but it's a spiritual one. I'm still going to hold to that. And I know there's a whole thing on that, but just I have to prove to you this way first, one step at a time. And Jesus says, verily, verily, I say unto you, he that heareth my word and believeth on him that sent me. Notice the two again. Notice the two again. He that heareth my word and believeth on him that sent me. So there's one that sends him and he's saying the words. See? Two. It's Father and Son. Hath everlasting life. So he that heareth my word and believeth on him that sent me hath everlasting life, and shall not come into condemnation, but is passed from death to life. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and they that hear shall live. See, it's these three words right here. It's those three words. He says, this is what I'm sure that the English majors have awesome, like fancy words for this. I'm just going to tell you plain out. This is what I call it's future and present all at the same time. This is like me saying, I'm coming over right now. I'm coming over right now. Am I over there yet? No, but I'm in the act of. So it's present tense and future. It's future and present. I'm coming over right now. Well, no, you're not coming over right now. You're just coming over, and at some point you'll be, we don't talk like that. We say, I'm coming over right now. I'm in the act of. I could say it when, let's say if I'm cooking, right? This is a 30-minute meal. I say, okay, I'm cooking right now. Or dinner is ready or is about to be ready right now. It's present and future. It's in the act of. Your meal is cooking right now. The hour is coming and now is. What he's saying is this is going down. It's in the act of going down. It's in the process of happening. I'm here to fulfill all things, including that. This isn't the hour is coming one day when, they'll hear the voice of the Son of God, but who knows when? That's not what he's saying. It's stuff, and now ain't 2,000 and counting years, by the way. And we look at that straight in the face. Do we believe it? Well, not if I put futurist eschatology in your head. Right? So he said, the hour's coming, and now is, when the dead, and this is exactly what Paul is saying to them, there is about to be a resurrection. There is about to be a judgment. It's coming around the corner. It's here. All right? So that's what is, and same thing what he says to the disciples, different topic, same idea though. It's this generation shall not pass before all these things be done. All right. So, and I'm going to remind everybody, by the way, that you're going to have to help me out there. And so you got to help me, bro. Thanks, man. Technology. That in Revelation 5, it appears that the Lamb, right, approaches the one that's sitting on the throne to get the book. And it says, because he is worthy, right? Because at first they can't find anybody. John is weeping. Oh, there's no one here that's worthy to open the book. And they go, no. Hey, we got the Lion of the tribe of Judah right here. He's worthy to open the book. So he's worthy to open the book. Are you telling me he hasn't opened the book yet? So is he like holding on to the book and just like leaving it on a nightstand and goes, maybe one day I'll open it? Or is the Father going, no, hold on. I'm not going to give it to you yet. Hold on. Wait a minute. No, not yet. Hold on. I'll tell you later. Hold on. Maybe one day. Okay, you could pop one seal, but that's just one. Like, is he worthy to open the book? Has he opened the book or not? Has he popped the seals or not? And when did he? Or are you saying he didn't? Or are you saying that he did because he resurrected, right? You believe that he resurrected. Is he with the Father? Oh, yeah, he resurrected. Yeah. Oh, he's seated at the right hand of the Father. Yeah, he's seated at the right hand of the Father. Well, the Father has the book on his right hand. He hasn't opened it yet? Has he given it to him yet? Do you see, if you reason that through, that doesn't make any sense, that he would be up there and just looking at the book. But if you accept that, no, he went up there and he was worthy to open the book, and then he opened the book. And then you get it. You go, wow. Because I'm going to suggest to you that most futurists also agree, by the way, that the feast of Passover was fulfilled, the feast of unleavened bread and the feast of first fruits, and the feast of Pentecost, which was in Acts 1, 2, and 3, right? But they're suggesting that, but the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles has not been fulfilled. Well, then that means he has not fulfilled all things. That's what you're saying. You're saying he did a partial short work on the earth, and he is yet to do another partial short work on the earth. That's what you're saying. That's not what he said, though. And that's not what Paul said. The Lord will do a short work on the earth. That's what he said. And that was quoted from Isaiah. And that's what Jesus said. This generation, short work, short time frame. It's all going to happen. So I'm going to suggest to you strongly that what you're seeing from chapter 5, 6, and 7 is an overview, not all of the views. You're going to see deeper views as we get into the book of Revelation, but what you're seeing is an overview of the fulfillment of those final three feasts that were fulfilled in the first century. All right, so this is the resurrection. That was part of the deal. And, we could talk some more about some of this, but I'm going to keep going just in case, because I want to make sure I stay on track here. All right. Not doing too bad. And it says, and one of the elders answered, saying unto me, what are these which are arrayed in white robes? See, he mentions the white robes. What did we hear about in the verse 9 up here? We heard about white robes. All right. And he says, and whence came they? And anytime there's an elder or some kind of angel or even Jesus asking someone else a question, we should pay attention. Because I always think to myself, there's something extra special in that. Because typically the angel is telling you, right? Because you're not going to know the answer. And that's actually exactly how John responds. He basically goes, well, how am I supposed to know? And I love that. So when you see that, I think I think that conjecture on my part, but I think that God is moving John to write it that way. So we pay attention. And he says unto him, Sir, thou knowest, I don't know, you tell me. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation. Okay. And have washed themselves, or their robes, have washed their robes and made them white. What do? They put on white robes. They got washed white robes in the blood of the Lamb, right? That's what it says there. Now, I'm going to take you back to remind you of what was said in seal number 5 in chapter 6. We talked about this last week because the first 4 seals are these horsemen, if you will, correct? But the 5th seal is unique. It's unique. It's not another horse. It's, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. You see? So this is where we talked about that. I believe that these are the first century saints that were being persecuted and killed. Example, Stephen, who was stoned, Acts chapter 7. We know for a fact that, for example, Paul and Peter, right? They were killed, right? They were martyred. Jesus talks about his faithful martyr in Revelation, I think chapter 2 or 3, his faithful martyr Antipas, who was slain, right? We know John the Baptist was martyred, right? So I was suggesting to you that this is the first century saints. And look what the first century saints, if I'm accurate on this, are saying. They say, how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? Right? And then it says, and white robes were given unto every one of them. See the white robes there? See that? Now they're definitely under the altar. They're definitely in heaven and they're definitely with the Lord, right? But then look what he says. Jesus says unto them that they should rest for a little season. Just a little while. It's a little while until their fellow servants also and their brethren should be killed as they were. So they're killed for the same reason and in a similar way, which timestamps them together at the same time frame. That needs to be fulfilled, right? But notice the term just for a little season. And that's when we talk. You think that that's 2,000 years that they're waiting? Or are you saying all of this still has to, like none of this has happened? Or are there people under the altar waiting remember, they're saying, when are you going to avenge? Oh, so Jesus has not avenged them yet. He hasn't. Is that what you're saying? Well, no, there's the destruction of okay, so then he has. All right, so then this little season, you go to chapter 7, and what do you see? You see these people being arrayed all of a sudden. After this I beheld, right? So Jesus said a little season, and it was indeed just a little season. I'm not going to tell you exactly how long because the scriptures don't tell me how long, but they do tell me it was a small season though. That's what they tell me. And now here I'm seeing people in white robes, and the elder specifically asks about hey, who are these? Who are these over here arrayed in white robes? See, it's a connection, I think, a clever connection where God is moving us to pay attention to the white robes and say, hey, notice when I said they had to wait a little while? Well, they waited a little while and then here it is. See? So what you're seeing is I think I'm going to suggest to you either a portion of or the 42 months, the Great Tribulation, because he says specifically that they came out of great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. All right. So I wanted to show you that. Now, do I have any further proof that little season really was a little season as opposed to 2,000 years and counting? Well, I'm going to suggest to you, that yes, once again, Jesus tells us. This time he uses a parable. And I noticed that I don't know that I've ever heard, and that doesn't mean that there hasn't been one, but I've never heard a sermon or a teaching on Luke 18, 1-8. So let me offer this. Think about that fifth seal. They're under the altar. Think about the first century saints that are under the altar. Think of it that way. And they're saying, how long, Lord, will it be before you avenge us? And he says, just a little while. Just a little while. Think of that while you're reading this parable. Jesus spake a parable unto them to this end, that men ought always to pray and not to faint, saying, there was in a city a judge, which feared not God, neither regarded man. So in other words, this judge, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about people, and he doesn't fear God. He doesn't care about any of that. And there was a widow in that city. Notice the term widow, by the way. And she came unto him saying, avenge me. Notice that. How long, O Lord, before you avenge us on those who did this to us on the earth? Avenge me of mine adversary. This woman goes up to him, or this widow, and he would not for a while, but afterward he said within himself, though I fear not God, nor regard man, yet because this widow troubleth me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. In other words, he's going, look, I don't want her to bust my chops, so you know what? I'll just go ahead and avenge her, and away we go. And then it says, and the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge saith. He's about to say, if an unjust judge will avenge someone quickly, what do you think God would do? And that's what this is about. It's about avenge, right? Avenge me of my enemies. And that's what he says. And shall not God avenge his own what? Elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear along with them? Right? Oh, they cried with a loud voice, O Lord, holy and true, when wilt thou avenge us on them that dwell upon the earth? See? And they're crying day and night unto him, right? Are you seeing the connection here? I hope you are. And what does he say here? I'm going to stop right on this line. I tell you, he will avenge them speedily. Just wait a little season. Do you see how that connects perfectly? Well, of course, the futurist says, well, speedily. 1,000 years, 2,000, 5,000, who knows? No. He avenges them speedily. When is that? 70 AD. Fulfilled. All things will be fulfilled. So I think I got a pretty good one there. I think that was a good one. And I'm going to now finish out Revelation 7 here. I'm going to go back there. I love that parable. All right, 15 onward. Okay. It says, therefore are they before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. Now, remember I talked to you about the Feast of Tabernacles, which is the seventh feast. He will tabernacle among them. He will be with them. In my Father's house there are many abodes. I go to prepare a place for you. See? Because Jesus comes to reconcile you to the Father. And that's what's going on here. Now, I do want to make note here with Revelation 3:12, because I want you to note this. This is just good information to have to clear your mind of some interpretations that they force into your skull, and then it confuses you when you read the scriptures. All right. So what I'm going to do is, do you notice it says that these ones that are, arrayed and worshiping and stuff, right? They're before the throne of God and they serve him day and night in his temple. Right? So I'm going to suggest to you this is the Father's temple. And I think I can prove that by just telling you the words of Jesus in Revelation 3:12. He says, him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God. His temple, do you see that? And they will serve him night and day. I will make him a pillar. You're staying, you're going to be here all the time. This is going to be your gig right here, right? This is your station. And he says, and he shall go no more out. Do you see that? And by the way, it continues, it says, and I will write upon him the name of my God. What does it say in Revelation 7? He sends the angel to seal. All right. No, not barcodes. Spiritual sealing. Okay. All right. So hopefully that helps you further understand that, again, there's a great consistency here, even within the book of Revelation, saying the same communication to you over and over and over again. And then it continues and it says, they shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. I want you to remember, for example, the woman at the well. And he says to her, when you come here for water, you realize you're going to have to come back here again, right? You're going to get thirsty again. And then the day after, you're going to get thirsty again. And quite frankly, same thing with hunger. You get hungry, and we're very blessed. I understand that. But do you understand that I think that no matter what, we have to always replenish. We always have to replenish. You won't have to do that anymore. And that's what Jesus said to the woman, the water that I'm going to give you, you're never going to have to drink again. You're never going to have to drink again. Neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb, which is in the midst of the throne, shall feed them. Notice there's one that's always sitting on the throne, and throughout this, and I'm not suggesting that the Lamb doesn't have a throne. I'm saying you have to see the throne not as a chair. You have to see the throne as a throne room and a sphere of authority. And so, for example, maybe you work for a company, right? There's maybe the head of the company, right? But there's other people. There's the vice president, there's the treasurer, and they have spheres of authority. Those are all thrones. If you go to a boardroom of a major company, it's not just one guy sitting in the room all by himself. He has a board of directors, if you will. He's got people there and they're discussing and they're arranging. So I'm suggesting to you that when you see it that way, you'll start to see that the him that sits on the throne and the Lamb, there's the Father and there's the Son. And it's all the way through the scriptures that I can see. It says, for the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them and shall lead them unto living fountains of water. So the Lamb, notice he leads them. He's the shepherd, right? The good shepherd. He leads What does he say? Him that heareth my words and believe on him that sent me, right? Him he will have everlasting life. Choose life or choose death. How do you choose life? Choose Christ. He paid the debt for you. I could take you back to Exodus, and it's the same thing. I could take you back into Jeremiah. He says, if you want to choose life, this is the direction you go. If you want to choose death, then do the opposite of what I'm telling you. Same thing with, hey, when you see that Roman army coming around, get out of there. When you see the abomination of desolation, get out of there. You listen to me, life. You ignore what I say, don't want to believe on me or the one that sent me, here we go. Death it is. And you're seeing the same theme all the way through. So he says, for the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them and shall lead them unto living fountains of waters, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. So allow me to remind you, do me a favor, bro. I'm going to go ahead and pick this one right here and just go to 2 John 9, because I just want to show them this. Beautiful. And again, this is what I mentioned before, right? And that's why you're seeing, and by the way, I'm not suggesting that there's no Spirit or Holy Spirit. I'm suggesting to you that, the 3 and 1 and the 1 and 3, which might convolute things, prevents you from seeing the roles, right? So you're going to see like great similarities between the Father and the Son, because Jesus is the express image of the living God, right? So like Father, like Son, if you will. However, it doesn't change that Jesus also says, my Father is greater than I. My Father is greater than all, right? And my Father gave me this authority, for example, right? And the Jews would always ask him, who gave you this authority? See, I think we miss the monarchy. And so what I'm suggesting to you is you can confuse the roles and even indeed who the Holy Spirit is. But to keep it simple for now, I just want to show you what it says here. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he hath both. And in my world, it's always been two. And in case you were confused about it, John was kind enough to write both the Father and the Son, and that's two. And that's what you're seeing throughout the book of Revelation. And I'm going to suggest to you that that's the Feast of Tabernacles in the new heaven and the new earth, in the new creation and spiritual kingdom of God and of his Christ. I'm going to also give you this scripture to ponder on. Do me a favor, bro. Give me Ephesians 3:21. Maybe hit 3:21 for me, bro, up on that top there. Yeah. Thank you, sir. And I want you to, and part of the reason why I try to inspire people, and I did a little digging on the Greek and checked into with some other folks that really, really know the Greek better than I do. And in my research, this right here, this statement is about as locked as you could get in the Greek language, that the world is without end. The way they wrote this in the Greek, it's pretty much locked down. So here's the verse. Unto him be glory in the church by Christ Jesus throughout all ages, world without end. Amen. I'm going to suggest to you, if we get out of the thinking of the annihilation of the earth, for example, and that there's going to be the end of the earth's existence, if you will, and that somehow humankind is going to be completely eradicated, then they can't use that fear, first of all, which casts out all perfect love. Fear always casts out love. And I think we had that experience in the last 2 to 3 years. That's visible, very visible. I don't think you have to be that terribly discerning to pick up on that one. And I think scriptures like this roll right past people because of that futurist annihilation, end of the world, everything's going to get destroyed, NWO. There's going to be this guy that's going to show up. It's probably, Trump's son-in-law, and he's going to go into Israel, and he's going to make a deal with them, and then he's going to flip out, and then I don't know, they're going to sacrifice a pig on the altar. Who knows what they're coming up with, right? None of which I see in Scripture. So it's all hinged on a lot of things that is just not there. And then that can draw you into fear. And so can believing that the world is going to be annihilated or the human race is going to be annihilated. And then, of course, cast out perfect love. And what else does it do? When people are fearful, they're not as sober-minded. And they can't make good decisions because they're afraid. I've rarely seen people in great fear make wise decisions. And yet Jesus says, fear not and be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. More difficult to do that if we're always afraid. Let me give you another scripture. I'm going to give you another one. My good brother Domenico, Isaiah 45:17. And I love how he's talking about, right? Because we already have the context of the remnant and that not all of Israel is Israel, right? But Israel shall be saved in the Lord with an everlasting salvation, right? So we saw the sealed ones. Ye shall not be ashamed nor confounded, world without end. That's an Old Testament scripture. I'm going to give you one more. I think I've used this before. Put Ecclesiastes, put EC, bro. That should come up. There you go. And just go 1:4. It says, one generation passeth away, and another generation cometh. And by the way, there would be no questions at what a generation is on this one, right? Well, a generation could be 2,000 years. No, it can't. No, it can't. It's that simple. No, it can't. But the earth abideth forever. So there's 3 scriptures there, and that's 3 witnesses. So I'm leaving that with you to consider so that if you take that out of your mind, we can soundly and I think without fear and with some confidence but humility all at the same time, learn of what's being communicated in the book of Revelation. And I don't mind telling you that as I've looked at it from the historical point of view, that things have really started to make sense, not only in the book of Revelation, but even things that Jesus says. So allow me this opportunity to show you a couple of these examples. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is do me a favor, bro. First, let's go to 1 Samuel. So go 1 and then SAM, and then that'll come up for you. And we're going to go 28. And that'll be good enough. Let's go for it. Oh, it's because of that. The 2 dots. Just maybe put in 28 for me. There you go. Thank you. I'm going to take you to 11. And I'll give you a quick background on this, guys, that this is where Saul goes and seeks a medium because he wants to talk to Samuel, and Samuel has died. But he wants to talk to Samuel because the Lord, Yahweh, this is Old Testament, has left him. And he's very upset and he wants to talk to his prophet. And Samuel was a good prophet. Best as I can tell in the scripture, he always did what God asked him to do. And he was a good prophet. And so now Saul's seeking him through a medium. All right. So that's the context, the picture. And I want you to see this. It says, then said the woman, this is the medium, whom shall I bring up unto thee? Pause. Notice how she's saying, bring up. Do you see that? Bring up. See? That means to bring someone up, and this woman's on the earth, they're below. They're not above, right? And he said, bring me up Samuel. So how come Saul doesn't think that Samuel's in heaven yet? Samuel's died. He's a good prophet of God, prophet of Israel. Might they have known something? They knew they had to wait for their redemption. They knew it. They knew it. I'm going to continue. And it says, and when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. And the woman spake to Saul, saying, why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul, because Saul had disguised himself. He didn't want her to know. And so he says, be not afraid. For what sawest thou? So he goes, don't be afraid. Just tell me what you saw. That's what he's saying there. And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. That's Elohim there. Some translate that as just God. Isn't that interesting? And I often talk about this, that the word God in Greek is theos. They use that term for deity. She's not talking about the Most High God, but yet she uses a term, she's seeing gods. So spirit beings, deities, if you will. And notice she's saying ascending out of the earth, not out of the heaven. And he said unto her, what form is he of? That's why I think the better translation here would have been just God. That's my personal opinion. ESV translates it that way. It's a little better. But anyways, what form is he of? And she said, of an old man that cometh up. See again, an old man coming up, which means down. And he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel. And he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed himself. And Samuel said to Saul, why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? See? All the way through, it's Samuel, a prophet of God, and he's being brought up. Now, we can talk about whether he was sleeping or alive. We can talk about that. But what we cannot argue about is, where was he? Well, he was somehow down. He wasn't up yet. All right. So if you understand now, right, the resurrection had not happened yet. And that's why the whole thing in the book of Acts, hey, there's about to be a resurrection and the Lord will do a short work, right? And the redemption, and you see the book of Revelation, and then all of a sudden, hey, we're sealing 144,000. And then 4 or 5 verses later, all of a sudden you see all these people up there saying salvation to our God, and they're from all kinds of nations. You see? It starts to make sense. You start to go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then I'm going to give you another thing that Jesus said that I think is really, really important for us to harbor on, if you will, or meditate on. Go John 8:56. And just give me 56, because otherwise I'll get carried away. Okay, that's good enough, I think. Yeah, give me this. This is where he's having an altercation, if you will, with the Pharisees. And Jesus says this, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it, and he was glad. So let's pause for a moment. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. And clearly Abraham was before on earth, right? Before Christ. And he saw it. He saw it. What did he see? I'm going to suggest to you, even if you read the book of Job, he saw his Redeemer. He saw the day that he would be redeemed. And if you read the book of Hebrews, it talks about how Abraham sought an even better country, a holy Jerusalem. And he was glad. So what's this saying? This is suggesting strongly, right? Why would Abraham? So if Abraham was already in heaven, is he just, now I'm going to suggest to you, he's waiting to see his day of redemption. And that's why the coming of the Lord and resurrection is tied together. And that's why if we think future, then no resurrection yet. We're still waiting. However, if the resurrection has happened, then that changes the whole interpretation of a lot of positions in theology. And I think it'll open up a lot of great discussions that could bring us such great hope, because to be closer to the truth is always better than to be further away from it. So we move forward, and I'm thinking to myself that the part of the reason why Father Abraham was rejoicing to see the day of Christ Jesus was indeed for the full fulfillment, if you will, of God's promises, and to bring them, and hopefully us, to the new heaven and to the new earth, in that new creation that Jesus prepared for us and for them. So I'll leave you with that. I do hope, guys, that you will meditate on this, of course. I'm speaking this out for you with the hope that you'll meditate on it and consider it, and even seek God in prayer about this, and maybe even read through this for yourself and see if these connections are something to continue to consider. In the meantime, I thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Grace and peace.